Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I always welcome my guests with a couple of things because I know that they are here spending some precious stuff. The first thing is time, and time is afforded 24 hours to each and every one of us. And to come and spend time with us, Bjorn is coming and he wants to spend some of that, and I want to thank him for it because this time that he spends with us, once he spends it, it is gone. And so we want to honor him for coming and spending his precious time. The other is the journey. The journey is a creator. It created him. And it deposited a couple of things in him that we want access to. Why? Because it helps us to become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. And so we want to have access to that. So we want to thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me.
It is an honor. I usually ask this question because I always tell people, you and I are on two journeys on this planet. The first, as I mentioned to you, is the independent journey, and then we have the interdependent journey. So the question that I ask to you is, how do you serve mankind?
I provide healing work. So I went through sort of a progression of experiences that ultimately brought out my own healing expression. And then since I've learned to harness that energy and to share it with other people so that they can benefit from it.
That is excellent, because I want to get into that because there's a lot of things hidden into there as to what those things are. One of the other customs that we do is start from the beginning, if you will, the beginning of the beginnings, I call it. And that is the family unit. The family unit, I tell people, is where a lot of things begin to formulate in us, our belief system, how we relate to people, our relationship skills, many of those things that you and I began to practice in life usually begins, that's the genesis, that it begins there. And so in this family, we have a couple of entities, mom and dad. Sometimes mom and dad are broken, sometimes they're not, and so forth. But we have these two entities, and you and I are in the mix, sometimes brothers and sisters. But in any case, all of the folks that are there are strangers, and we have to learn of each other. What was your family unit like?
Right. Well, I should go back just a bit before that because I think it's important also to state that when I was born, I actually experienced a birth trauma. So I got stuck in the birth canal, couldn't breathe, and all of that. And so that actually had a very deep impact on me through a lot of my life. As far as my family goes, family of four, my dad was a farmer, my mom was a family living agent, home economist, and I had an older sister. So I grew up on a farm, and it had its pluses and minuses. Is there anything particular you're looking for with it?
I know, just how was it? How was the day? What was their relationship with mom and dad? How did that formulate you and your belief system as to how did they relate to each other, and how did you manage yourself amongst that mix of family
I was really
dynamics?
close to my mom, and my grandpa also lived on the farm in another house, and I was really close to him too. I would go over to his house all the time, every day, pretty much, and watch like Tom and Jerry or do something. I played outside a good deal. I like to play a spy game. My father and my uncle worked together on the farm, so I saw a lot of my uncle too. We did a lot of, roughhousing, wrestling, and that sort of thing.
What kind of farm did you guys have?
A dairy farm.
Dairy farm? Oh, okay. Because I grew up on a farm as well, and we had all kinds of critters, animals, and all kinds of one stuff. We had goats and pigs and all kinds of a
Yeah.
wonderful life that we had there. And I learned a lot about living and surviving, if you will. I learned how to make everything, man. Butter, cheese, oil, coconut oil, you name it. I learned how to do everything while I was there on the farm. It was hard work, but I have fun memories of being on that farm. But yeah, it was hard work, though. You learn a lot of lessons there, man.
Yeah. And my father, he's very, what's the word? He's not the easiest person, or wasn't the easiest person to work with.
Yeah.
He would be like extremely specific about exactly how he wanted things.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I struggled with communicating with him. But as far as the farm went, yeah, there were a lot of things about it that I enjoyed and appreciated, and a lot of things I didn't like so much.
Yeah, I love, I love the serenity of it. I love the exploration of it, that I was able to allow to go anywhere and explore. But I know I couldn't go too far, because once I have to hear that yell and make sure, because I was on the farm with my grandfather, who also owned a rice field that I had to be a part of. But yeah, I can testify to some of the fun times, and I know about some of those crazy times with communications between dad and grandparents and so forth. So here you are, man. You are growing up within this interesting mix, if you will. You have your support. You have grandfather, your uncles are there, dad is there, and you have all the animals and nature around. As you are growing and moving through life, and being on the location of a farm, you don't have that many others that are on that farm, man. How did you relate to people outside of the family?
Well, yeah, there weren't like neighbors close by, super close by or anything. So if I wanted to have a friend over, basically would have to pick up the phone and call them and invite them over,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. It's not like anyone had cars or anything, or so it was a little bit alienated from other kids in that sense. But by the time I was, 4, I was going to preschool and then kindergarten and all that. So there was plenty of interaction with other kids,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, and as you're growing up and you're moving through life, man, and you're heading into college and even high school, how were you moving and thinking about life when you're, let's say, high school? Because I know in high school, most of us are just a bunch of crazy little kids running around the place. What was your life like in high school, man?
Well, I was a bit of a rebel, I guess.
Yeah.
I would skip school and, smoke weed. I think there was a semester where my report card came and my parents had no idea I'd been skipping at all. And the report card said I'd missed like a third of the days for the quarter or something. I really disliked being in school for a number of reasons. Part of it was that I didn't like to be told how to think,
Yeah.
and that really bothered me. But more so, I had trouble feeling like I fit in to that school environment, especially growing up in a town where, where there were a lot of other farm kids and that sort of thing in a rural
Hmm.
area. It's not a lot of diversity. There's not, both just in the physicality, but also just in diversity of thought or otherwise. So I just didn't feel like it was the place for me.
Hmm.
And so I left whenever I could.
Yeah. And when college came around, what was your approach to, because as they're saying, we're getting older and we're heading towards adulthood, if you will. And what was your approach to college, or did you go to college or did you go to work from there? What was your approach? Because I know sometimes people just want, this was their primary approach is this, I just want to get the hell out. So what was your primary approach as far as when you were looking towards college or work? Well, how did you do, where did you go?
I went to college. 4-year college. And
Why did you, and what field did you pick, and why did you pick it?
well, I chose international business. I guess partly from a practical standpoint that I thought, well, I'm going to school and we're paying money for it, so I should try and do something practical. But I also had an interest in business.
Mm-hmm.
And the international part was really because that actually was what was interesting to me.
Yeah. That
And
sounds interesting for a farm boy to be looking at international, um, you know, when you
yeah,
got there and you started looking at the classes and stuff like that, the syllabus of the classes, and you are in it, and you're looking at that international piece of it. How did you feel once you landed, man, and you started taking those classes?
I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. It wasn't for me. What was for me about the experience of college was that I started to stretch my legs socially. I
Hmm.
had a lot of social anxiety, and I was starting to make friends, more friends than I had ever really had before, and getting to know people, and yeah, just developing a social life in an environment that kind of felt more safe to me. And that was a very rewarding experience for me, making all these friends, and we all hung out together and were pretty close. But I was notorious for being a bad student. Not that I didn't have an aptitude, just that not that dissimilarly from high school, I would skip classes and I would piss off my teachers, and I just did enough to get by and to pass and to get my degree, pretty much.
Yeah, I was one of those different students as well. I remember
Hmm.
walking into my electronic class, and the teacher wrote the book. And so I looked at him. I went the first day and I said, hello. And grabbed his book. And I think after I sat down in the first day of class, I left. I went and I read the book and I never showed back up. Just showed up for tests and left. Kept passing all of his tests because he put everything in his book. I mean, what is he going to
Yeah.
teach me in class that is not in the book? So I just read his
Uh,
book and come back and take all his tests. So he never
yeah.
argued with me at all. He just kept looking at me because I kept passing all of his tests.
Was your school a big one? Like, because I know, like, where I went, there was maybe like 2,500 students. So if
Yeah,
some teachers, they would actually have participation policies as part of the class syllabus, and they
yeah,
would be
yeah.
especially angry if I wouldn't follow them.
He didn't bother me much because, like I said, his big deal was the tests and his the syllabus that he put out had stress and the importance of his tests and all this type of stuff because his ego was about his book. Worked as hard to put those books together. So that was the piece. And so I just came and read the book and understood what he was talking about. And so I would just walk in, take the test, and he'd look at me and says, good to see you, Mr. Primus. And he would, good to see you too. And then we'd go home, man. And so
Nice.
we understood each other. So here you are, man. You did what you had to do to get out of college. You're out. And the program, we were all doing the program at this point in time. The program is to go to college. You come out. And once you come out, the program tells us that we have to get that job. Talk to us
Yes.
about that, getting that job after you come
Nah.
out and the program continues in our life until that day when we start disconnecting from it. So, what profession did you head into and how did that come about?
I spent the whole summer after I graduated looking for a job, and it was driving me nuts. I landed a bunch of interviews, but that didn't materialize into anything, and I didn't really have any real experience, so that was, there wasn't much of a selling point there. And it finally actually got to a point where, I don't know, maybe 2 months in, I got fed up to the point where one day I sort of threw my hands up and I said to myself, I'm just going to go to the library and find a book about how to make money. And so I went to the library and I found Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Good
And
book.
I started reading that in the library, and then got really, really excited, and I just started voraciously consuming all of the books from that series.
Mm-hmm.
And it opened my eyes just in terms of what was possible for the world of entrepreneurship and freedom and being independent. And I learned reading in those books that if I was to get into anything, that I should get into sales, because that would be a valuable skill later on for me on an entrepreneurial path. And so it was right around that time I got a job offer. It's just a temp job. And
Yeah.
it wasn't in sales, but it was a job. So I took it. It's just a loan processor or something. And within a few years, I found my first job in sales from that. And that kind of started the longer stretch of my corporate career.
Yeah, sales is not as easy as people think.
Do people think it's
It is
easy? I don't think people think that sales is easy. I think that they're terrified of the idea of doing it.
yeah. Some people are terrified. I've met people that says, you guys are just, it's just a cakewalk. And I tell them, I says, yeah, try it, and tell me if you can handle it, because there's so much in it from psychology. There's so much you have to learn, timing, closing I mean, it's just so much within that term sales that one has to learn and be a part of it. And then they have to learn all about mindsets and stuff like that. But that's a great series. I remember giving offering that book to my sons for them to read as gifts as well. So here you are, man. You're doing the program. You got to get your job. You got to do the things that they're telling us that you did. You got the job. As far as the first one to get, we got the bills. We got to pay the bills, right? And you got the one to help you pay the bills to get started. You got into sales. Talk to me, because the piece that drove you to the sales was the data that you got from the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So this data now that you read, I want to make money. So you're heading to make money now, according to that statement that you said.
But it was that. But before that, during college, I had read a couple of more spiritual books that had really opened me up and influenced me. One was Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman, and the other was
great book.
A couple of books by Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, 11 Minutes, and a few others. Okay. And so I had been more or less studying personal development since I was 19, 20 years old. And so then when I got into the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it was connecting dots to those reference points as well, and what that could all mean. But yeah, so there I was doing the program, and I was doing really well in terms of how society would measure it. I was performing really well at my job, making really good money. I had a really nice apartment. Something was not right. I couldn't put my finger on it. And so I started getting back into personal development. And I was studying Bob Proctor, learning about the stick person concept. It was there where things took a turn. So for those who don't know about the stick person concept, it's basically a visual representation of the mind, and it's designed to give the brain, the mind, an orderly way of thinking about itself. And so the diagram is quite simple. There's a circle with a line right down the middle of this, or across the middle of the circle. The top half of the circle represents the conscious mind. The bottom half represents the subconscious mind. And then that's the head, of course. And then below the head, there's another, little stick, and then a tiny little circle below that, which represents the body. And I was going through his program called the Success Puzzle, and the Success Puzzle Part 4 was about paradigms, and this was a new concept to me. I had never even thought about or considered that I might have taken on patterns from other people. It was very novel to me at the time. I was 27. Saw this picture in the paradigm part where it showed the stick person concept, but the image was different because they had removed the top of the head, and it was
Hmm.
showing basically what you are as a baby. And it showed this little basic baby stick person with an opening at the top of the head, and all the people around it and all their thought forms just going directly into that baby's head. And I went to work the next day, and I was sitting at my job, and I had this notion to create this little exercise for myself. And I wrote down 3 questions. I answered them. The first
Yeah.
question was, what's my most painful memory? And I thought back, and there was this memory from high school where I was feeling very bullied. My second question was, what am I most grateful for in my life right now? And I can't quite remember what I answered for that, but it had something to do with the skills that I had developed. And then the third question was, would I have this thing that I'm most grateful for if I had not experienced this more painful thing?
Yeah.
And as I connected the dots, I realized I wouldn't.
Hmm.
And so what happened was, in my mind's eye, I actually saw that diagram of the baby stick person flip upside down, and all these thought forms start spilling out
Yeah.
of this image. And simultaneously, as I see these thought forms start to spill out, tears just start gushing down my face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now it's the end of the day. Everyone's getting up to leave. So I walk out of the building. It's the middle of winter and there's snow on the ground. I feel like I'm floating down the street, like just swept up in bliss. That was almost like a warm blanket around me, just sort of carrying me wherever I wanted to go. And I think I went 20 blocks the wrong way, didn't even realize it. And I had these sort of cathartic realizations about this gratitude that I was experiencing was directly connected to like anger and feelings about my father, and letting go of that. There was like a forgiveness that coincided with the experience of gratitude.
Yeah.
So it was like some energy unblocked itself for me to experience that gratitude.
Hmm.
And so that experience just totally changed the trajectory of my life, because when I came back into work the next day, I realized immediately like that I had become ultra sensitized to the environment that I was in overnight. And
Yeah.
so just being in the building where I was working, I started getting a stomach ache, and it would last until I would leave.
Yeah.
So I didn't last in that job for more than a few months before I quit,
Yeah.
and had to explore other things. But that was kind of a starting point for me, in the sense that it opened up my energy and opened me up emotionally to experience more of the world. And it also started to set my internal compass in a way that caused me to more actively seek out experiences that I felt in authentic alignment with.
Yeah. There's a couple of principles. That's a powerful story, man. Couple of principles that you talked about. Seeking ye shall find. Those are principles. You've heard people say, what you're looking for is looking for you, things like that. You talked about, you know, the fact that there's another principle, and I tell people, it says the truth shall set you free or make you free. And it is your truth. And you talked about that truth when you realized it. And when that revelation came, a lot of us, when we get that truth, we see it. It's usually an emotional blockage that trauma caused. And the trauma is the creator of us all. Without the trauma, we would not be created. It's a weird conundrum, but it is the thing that causes us, once we recognize it, it's the one that ushers us into this growth trajectory, if you will. And once we
So,
learn about forgiving and all the different things because of what people's behavior did or whatever they done, we can now learn how to forgive and make a powerful entry into our personal growth as we move through life.
there's another way of saying that too, which is if you look at like the law of polarity or physical matter,
Yeah.
We need to have both a dark and a light force basically working on both ends for the physical matter to actually exist.
The yin and the yang, they is another way that they portray that when we look at the Japanese expression of that process. So it is, and so it. But what a powerful explanation of how you came through and what happened. And once you became open and awakened, and that unease of where your location was, and it was time to move on. Isn't it wonderful? Every time you got there, your sensitivity to that whole process and where you belonged just was time to move on, man. And when you began to step out, it's amazing how things come into place and how things began to manifest in your life. So when you stepped out, what did that stepping out look like, and where did you end up stepping out to?
Well, right around that time, I made some money in the stock market. And so I cashed that money out and I quit my job. And I spent a few years just like trying to explore ways that I could perhaps make money entrepreneurially doing things that I felt good about, that I felt in alignment with.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, at that time, I was able to have some small successes, but nothing sustained. And I ended up going back to a corporate job for a few years, albeit a company that had a lighter energy than the financial services company I was at
Yeah.
before. That was more enjoyable for me, and it was smaller, and it was had just a fresher energy to it. And
Yeah.
I stayed there for a few years, and then that's when things started getting more interesting after I quit that and sort of outgrew that role. I went on a traveling quest of sorts, and I lived in like 15 countries over about 5 years, all over the place. And eventually I landed in a place called Tulum in Mexico.
Mexico.
And so for me, my decision to go to Tulum seemed random at the time because part of it was just like it was peak COVID 2021, and I was of the mindset that I wanted to be in an environment that has few restrictions as possible. I didn't choose to judge how other people wanted to live and what type of environment they wanted to be in, but I wanted to be
Yeah.
in a place where I could move around freely and not wear a mask and all that. So
Yeah.
Tulum happened to have a reputation as one such place, and it was actually attracting a lot of people from around the world that were coming there and sort of seeing it as a type of haven where they could be. And it had a spiritual component to it as well, because Tulum is known to be kind of a spiritual melting pot of different traditions and modalities and stuff. And I had never really experienced any of them aside from just doing some basic meditation type stuff. I had really and maybe yoga,
Mm-hmm.
tai chi. Other than
Yeah.
that, like I had not done anything shamanic or anything like that before. And so I arrived in Tulum, and I had a friend there. He hurt his toe when I was there, and his toe was all black and blue, and the toenail was completely black. Like, it was to the point where it was so black that anytime I was with him and someone saw his toe, they felt the need to tell him that his toenail was going to fall off.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't seen him for a couple of days. I circle back with him, and he tells me to look at his toe, and I look, and the thing's totally normal somehow.
Yeah.
There's no discoloration. The toenail is all there. It's just white, like a normal toe. I couldn't tell the difference between that and any other of his toes. And well, how did this happen? And he said, well,
Yeah.
he had gone to this energy healing ceremony called the Light Portal, and
Mm-hmm.
he left that way. It was like a 3-hour ceremony. And so he said, I think he said he learned about it. He was out having a smoothie, and there were some girls talking about it, and he heard their conversation and jumped into their conversation. That's how
Yeah.
it happened. So he invited me to go with because they had this thing once a week. And I entered this space not really having any strong beliefs about spirituality or any tradition or style or any beliefs about spirit guides or any of it. I was just kind of an open vessel and I wanted to see what it was like. So there were about 20 of us lined up around the outside of this. It wasn't a circular room, but it had kind of you could call it almost circular. We were all around the edge of the room, and they had us going through these different processes. Like we were doing open mouth breathing while we were doing like qigong, and they had us laying down and we were doing open mouth breathing while the 4 or 5 facilitators would go around the room, and someone would be chanting, someone would be banging a drum, others would be doing like physical energy work, like pushing and prodding on your physical blockages on the body. And this woman came up to me, Ina. She had kind of had a reputation of being the fiercest one of all of them, and she was from this like long lineage of Muslim healers. Anyhow, she came up to me and started working on me, and whatever she was doing, it hurt a lot to the point where I wanted to scream. And there were people in the room screaming. There were people screaming. There were people crying. Like, it was really something. I'd never experienced anything like that before. But so she worked on me for a bit, and then she stopped, and I started laughing. Uncontrollable laughter, just very enjoyable laughter. And I didn't know what I was laughing about exactly, and I didn't care. I was just laughing. And so I left that experience like not with any miraculous healing, but with just an idea that I really enjoyed that a lot. I'm going to see where this goes. So I booked a private session with 2 of the facilitators from the Light Portal. Ina, the woman that worked on me, and her partner, Jose. So they came to my apartment, had me lay down on this mattress, and Ina worked on me for like an hour and a half. You imagine, it was excruciatingly painful.
Yeah.
And afterward, the 3 of us sat down, and she was telling me of the things that she had seen, because she would see and she would tell me. She said something about on my father's side, she saw the anger and fear, and my mother's side, she saw the sadness and fear, and she saw a spirit guide that was a jaguar and a spirit guide that was a Native American shaman. And then the last final part of the private session was meet your guides. And this was where her partner, they had an offering. Her partner would serve me a plant medicine called hape, which is known as shamanic snuff, mostly tobacco, but there are other things that are added in as well. It's made by the indigenous, by the shamans in these different tribes. Well, good stuff is. And they pray over it, and they do certain things with it. And let's see if I can find so I have this thing here. This is called a tepe.
Yeah.
So with the shamanic snuff, with the hape, it's a psychoactive experience, right? And you take it in the nose. So you have one person, one person's got it in the nose, the other blowing it, right?
Yeah.
And I've never done anything like that before either. And so he blows the snuff in my nose, and then he got up behind me, walked behind me, and he started shaking maracas in my ears. And so this is the point usually where my mind would come alive, and it would try and explain and rationalize to me what was occurring in the environment. I couldn't even think because of the sounds. They were right in my ears. And so I'm having this psychoactive experience, but I can't think. And then Jose starts making these chanting sounds. The next thing I know, I'm making chanting sounds. And I can't stop making them. And this is when I felt, so it was like a force, like starting to really, really rise through me, like very, very, very powerful masculine force that was pushing its way through. And this trauma, really just dense, horrible trauma being pushed with it. And as it finally was sort of pushed out, I got sick on the floor and, purged my guts out, and I lay there for hours, too sick to move. And I didn't I was so nauseated. I didn't even want to move 2 feet over to climb up and lay on the couch because I didn't want to lay on a soft surface. I wanted the hard density of the floor under me to feel safe.
Yeah.
But the next morning when I woke up, I realized that all of the pain and tension I had been carrying for the past 2 or 3 years in my knees was gone. I had developed this sort of an arthritic type of condition where anytime I would be sitting for more than a few minutes, I would have to straighten my legs out because they would start to get my knees would get really stiff. And it was pervasive, every day, anytime I would sit, this would happen. And after the experience with that private session, it just disappeared and went away completely. So that just set me on a deeper exploration.
Yeah.
It brought me to some different medicines.
Yeah, when you get in contact with the real stuff, because I've seen people that call themselves shamans that are not really anything at all, and which I tell them, I said, that's dangerous just as much as anything else, because they can be opening you up to all kinds of crazy stuff. But when the real stuff happens, man, it'll change your life forever. I'm from British Guiana in South America, and some of those people there, and especially even in Suriname and some of these people in the jungle and the shamans up in there, I'm telling you, man, those guys are the real stuff. And so when you get in contact with them, you will change your life forever. And so here you are, you're never going to be the same. Never going to be the same. So you have changed and you're there. And this is all around COVID time. When you come up and you're waking up the next day now, your life is like what? Where do you go from there, man? Because as I said, your life has just changed. It's for a guy coming into that to be exposed to that kind of power that has just gone in there as a novice, basically, and then getting your world rocked. How did you begin to put your life together?
Well, that was a beginning for me. In a lot of ways. And what that really did is that one experience removed a lot of density, but the patterns were still there. And it did really change my relationship with alcohol. I don't think I've been drunk since that time. Every now and then I'll have a drink or two. I just don't enjoy having more than that anymore. So it's weird that I didn't expect that connection there, but it happened. But that experience just opened me up to go deeper and to find new teachers. And I worked with this guy, Pancheen Nima, who came from Peru. And I did a couple of plant spirit diets where I worked with the plants over periods of time. And I entered into agreement, like not to engage in certain behaviors, not to eat certain foods. One of the diets was actually without even physically taking the plant. It was all done sonically through sound. And so the maestro he and I would meet over Zoom. He would give me a chant, and then I would be listening to the chant every day and do a grounding ritual with it. And then every 2 or 3 weeks we'd meet. He'd give me another chant, and I'd continue. But about a month into doing that, I went for a walk one evening, and as I was walking, I started to feel this really warm sensation, like not like right in the center of the chest, but more in the upper chest, right in the middle. And then I had this sensation. It felt and seemed almost like what would happen if the petals of a flower bloomed all at the same time. It was like this opening occurring all at once. And the moment that happened, the entire world around me just completely changed totally. I mean, all of a sudden, I was stumbling around like a drunk, drunk on like unconditional love. There was so much like love pouring through this opening. Everywhere I looked, whatever I fixed my attention on, I fell in love with.
Yeah.
The tree, I'm in love with this tree. The road, I'm in love with this road. It doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
everywhere I look, I would see colors
Mm-hmm.
in the air, and these colors would dynamically shift and change. And it was like the most beautiful Monet painting I'd ever seen, but yet the culmination of colors would shift and change, but it would be no less beautiful.
Yeah.
So that was really an energetic rebirth for me. That experience did something, and it kind of culminated the explorations that I was doing and sort of marked the end of that part of the cycle. And I came back to the States after that, and I went through integration.
Yeah. And once you came back in the States and began to integrate back into Western civilization, basically, which is a
Yeah.
totally different mindset to come back into and then assimilate as you are doing that. How did that adjustment begin to affect you? And did you affect it?
Well, it was strange coming back here, and then all of a sudden I didn't have access to all the different spiritual tools that I was used to in Tulum. And I'd been living there for a year and a half. So it started with, well, I need to find something that I can do here to
Yeah.
keep my practice and all this that goes beyond my sitting meditation. And so tuning forks sort of appeared in my field as a viable way of doing that. And so what I learned about this healing modality called biofield tuning. And initially I just became a student of it, and I just was
Mm-hmm.
downloading, I have hundreds of them, biofield tunings, and I would just listen to them, and it would put me into a really wonderful state. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I started practicing Qigong regularly every day.
Yeah.
I signed up for a online course, like a 12-month course where you had a practice you did every day. So I was
Yeah.
doing some movement, but also some sound healing. And I was just sort of tuning into myself and realizing, okay, I might need some extra attention and care to my energy body at this time. I was probably spending 3, 4, 5 hours a day doing meditations and listening to these things for quite a while to settle in. And I was, because even though I had gone through all these explorations, I still
Mm-hmm.
had physically health issues that hadn't resolved yet. My
Yeah.
blood pressure had been high, pre-hypertension, since I was in my early 20s. And now I'm 41, and my blood pressure, the last I measured, was like 108/62, So a lot of it, has just been learning to take care of myself and be in tune with how I'm feeling and listen to that and work with that. And then in sync, in concert with that, to become aware of my patterns and what my triggers are. And then when those triggers would come up, to move through the energy and learn how to move through that energy and connect with the deeper part of the pattern and release it.
Yeah.
Or if not necessarily like move it from my field, because the information's always going to be there, but to release the emotional charge that would cause that pattern to have an influence over.
Yeah. I've known people that heal themselves from cancer with once they understood certain principles. And I understand the programming of the natural world, which is totally against everything else that one who's on the path to spiritual development and personal development, and the principles that they will utilize. Plant is one of them. And the natural world is getting, scientists are now getting some wisdom as to what plants can do as far as healing and so forth. But again, even the pharmaceutical company, the pharmaceutical got that stuff from a plant. And then they'll take that plant and then they'll break it down to that level. And then they'll start trying to control their patent as whatever. But it came from a plant that they took and broke down to get to what they want. And so if they are doing that and grabbing all the info and the stuff from the plant and then they're telling you not to get the plant. It tells you something, right? What they're trying to do. So what they're trying to do is trying to keep that money from them, trying to keep you not going to that plant to getting it yourself. But I've known so many people that are able to heal themselves from some of those major diseases that are standing out there. There's a couple of guys that I knew I interviewed, and these guys would take the worst of the worst, because you have studies about the placebo effect, and the placebo effect works. So, and what did they do that make it works to some a degree? Is that that individual believes that whatever they're taking is going to get them healed, and that shows and proves that the power of the mind is able to even heal sickness and disease. But they don't want to tell you and I at all, because it'll make them broke, as they say. But there you are, man. And now I wanted to know, how are you able, as you're going through all of this stuff, and you've learned so much, how did you begin to navigate to the space where you are now going to educate others as to who they are, and how did that come about?
Kind of happened organically. So when I had been in Tulum and had been doing the chanting, people had started to become aware of it, and people would request that I would do chants at ceremonies, and I had been invited. I was invited to become a facilitator for the light portal and to do healing work there. But when I came back to the States, for a while, I was just focusing on taking care of myself. But there was a point with the biofield tuning where, after I had listened to so many biofield tunings, I got to a point where I thought, if I'm going to go further with this, I need to learn how to actually do it myself.
Yeah.
And so I went through a training program to learn how to do it myself, which then evolved into, okay, now I'm practicing on other people. And then over time, I learned how to integrate it with the chanting and to use the sound that I would channel from spirit in a way similar to, like, I still use the forks, but minimally, and I use my voice as the primary tool.
Yeah.
So I connect with the energy, and I just allow the sound to come through as it needs to.
Guys, you're listening to us for a little while now, and this journey that we're on, this personal journey, there's so many ways that one can achieve their path. Everyone is different, but as you're listening to our conversation, the outcome is what one is after. As you are, if from our conversation something resides, it lodged in you, and you're like, wait a minute, I need to find out more. We're going to provide the links for you to get access to him. You've got to, because he's been through some stuff, man, and he laid out a bunch of it as to how he was able to get access and came out. And that's what he's interested, that's what I'm interested in, you coming out on the other side. And music, I'm a musician. I know what sounds can do. I mean, everyone knows what sound can do. Just put on a radio. And because what does it do, and what is chanting and all of these different things? What does a song do when you hear it? Let's take your regular song that you hear on the radio. It changes your state. And now when you are going to take it and utilize it spiritually, you can enter into deeper states along with meditation and so forth, and you can go into some deep, deep, deep spiritual locations, man, that will get you freedom. So sound therapy, they call it all kinds of stuff, but sound can get you your deliverance just like anything else. It's just another tool that is used to get you from one state. Meditation does the same, get you from one state. Breathing does the same. Yoga does the same. These are tools that are out there. Don't be afraid of the tools that are being used to get you to where you need to be. Man, York, thank you so much for coming to and just talk with us, man. Sharing your journey is a powerful one. I've learned so much. I haven't seen I haven't seen that in so long. I remember a long time ago. The same thing as far as having that. I haven't seen that in a
It's a lot of
long
fun.
time.
Hape is a very enjoyable medicine because it's a very high vibration. It's
Yeah,
kind of
haven't seen
celebratory.
it in a long time. And I tell people those type medicines are, I looked at it as the elevator, the express elevator for you to get to where you need to go. Because when you do it any other way, sometimes your mind gets into the way and you have all these thoughts that you're battling and so forth. But sometimes the express elevator gets you there quicker and you don't even have the time to be, as you were talking about, you didn't have the time to start talking yourself out of it. You're there and you just have to learn how to come down and begin to allow yourself the opportunity to experience what you're going through because you're already there. So sometimes it's good to take the elevator versus taking the stairs. That's all I always tell people, that's the difference.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
that's it.
especially if you're going to be moving through enough energy to be of service to someone else. It's
Yeah.
like that's kind of the reason
Yeah.
why you do it.
Yeah. And so, again, guys, we're going to provide you all the information so that you can get access to him and change your life, man. Change the directory of your life and grab a friend and bring them along because we always have a friend of ours that ushers us into all the little thing. They'll bring us for something else. And then the next thing you know, we're like, boom. So bring a friend along for the ride, introduce them to him. We'll provide all that information, man. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much. It's been great.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.